Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. I got a little football, a couple of basketball teams to talk about. Lots going on, even as we get closer to Christmas, folks. Before we get too deep off into the weeds here, I want to remind you about a couple of other podcasts to look for. Be sure to check out The Memo, our news podcast at the Daily Journal, all things Northeast Mississippi. That comes to you every Wednesday and Friday. And for all your high school sports needs, there's Prep Rally, comes to you every Wednesday. Check for those where you look for your podcast. Logan, how are you, man?
Doing good, yeah. Still trying to juggle this whole football thing and working in a couple of basketball teams as well, and keeping up with all these new coaches that are coming in and coaches that are leaving, and same thing with recruits. Commitments that are dropping off the board and commitments that they're still trying to secure, and kind of a busier time of the year than what I normally have this time of December.
Yeah, I noticed some of the hires they're making, Logan, and it looks like there's an effort being made to bring in some Mississippi connections there. I thought the Marcus Johnson hire on the offensive line was interesting. It created some internet chatter with, a very successful Ole Miss player who had been at Duke. He'd been away from Ole Miss for a long time. He was on that 2003 Cotton Bowl team with Eli, but Marcus Johnson coming in to coach offensive line. And also Mark Hudspeth coming back to Mississippi State after having been head coach at Louisiana Lafayette. Looks like Joe Moorhead is being pretty intentional to create some Mississippi ties on staff.
Yeah, I thought that as well, and that's something he talked about. He was going to, make some hires that had some ties to the South because he himself didn't necessarily have any ties. Charles Huff, the running backs coach that he brought down from Penn State, didn't have any ties. Some of the hires that he's made doesn't really have any roots in the South, so he's bringing in some assistants that still have that. And I thought the Marcus Johnson stuff was pretty entertaining myself, just to see some of the reactions, all the conspiracy theories about how he's going to sabotage Mississippi State's program and the benefit of the Rebels and all that. Look, no coach is going to do that. I mean, ruin their professional career over that. I mean, these guys are professional and they're loyal to whoever is writing the checks out for that week. So,
are you sure about that, Logan? You don't think he's going to come in and go after Nick Fitzgerald's other knee?
Yeah, it's some crazy stuff. And I thought the Mark Hudspeth thing was pretty interesting too, mainly because when he was here in the past, here's a wide receivers coach. They bring him in as a tight ends coach this time. I'm assuming that that's what I've seen. They actually haven't. Mississippi State itself has not announced the Mark Hudspeth hire yet. They haven't put out a release or anything yet. I'm not sure what the delay is. He's actually out on the road recruiting on Mississippi State's behalf right now, and I'm not sure what's caused that delay or whatever. But and that may actually be out by the time people are listening to this podcast. But it's really a strange situation at Mississippi State right now, because you've got a lot of coaches that are the coaches that are still on staff at Mississippi State. Probably only one of them actually still has a job past the Tax Slayer Bowl, and that's defensive line coach Brian Baker. And that's not a certainty in and of itself, but all the other position coaches, their positions have already been hired by this new staff. And I haven't even seen this new staff. The last time I saw Joe Moorhead was in that introductory press conference a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't seen the new running backs coach. I haven't seen the office, the quarterbacks coach or the defensive coordinator. Hadn't seen any of these guys. They've all been out on the road recruiting, and rightfully so, because right now State's had I think it's 7 players leave the program or decommit or flip their commitments or whatever since Dan Mullen left to go to Florida. So some of those were planned. Some of those were guys that didn't fit in with the new what the new coaches wanted, and some of those were kind of sudden. The Evan McPherson, the number 2 kicker in the country, flips his commitment to Florida. He's the only one that's left to go to the Gators so far. But right now that was unplanned. The Ladarius Bishop commitment, the 3-star commitment from Arkansas, flips his commitment to the Razorbacks. Those two were kind of unplanned. They weren't expecting that to happen as far as I can tell. But some of the other ones were kind of encouraged to seek elsewhere, some spots. So, those were the two biggest losses out of the, 6 or 7 that they've lost so far.
Our friend Blake Morgan, who used to cover the preps for the Daily Journal, Logan, was writing earlier this week that Marcus Murphy could flip to Tennessee, the West Point running back there. Of course, Blake is covering recruiting for the Vols now. Do you think that's something that happens in the days ahead?
I've seen some video interviews from Marcus Murphy down from the Mississippi-Alabama All-Star Classic this week, and he's firmly committed to Mississippi State. He is going to take a visit to Tennessee this weekend, as far as the latest thing that I've seen. But he said he's still solid to Mississippi State, and I would expect that to stick. That would be a huge surprise to see him to go to Tennessee at this point.
Talking Ole Miss football, Logan, the transfer of quarterback Shea Patterson to Michigan became official earlier this week. There was nothing really newsy about that. Shea Patterson was going to leave, and Michigan had always been considered a landing spot for him. He took that official visit last weekend. He was joined by Ole Miss teammates Deontay Anderson, the defensive back, and wide receiver Van Jefferson. Those guys will leave as well. It will become official. The bottom line is they will not be at Ole Miss next year. And when you look at this group right now, other names have been confirmed. There are other guys leaving the program, but a lot of these names have been out here for quite a while now. Jerry and Street, Jalen Julius, Trey Nixon. There are some others. No one has been as impactful in the program as Shea Patterson and Van Jefferson. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is where you have to be careful, you can't just write it off and say that's not important, because given the scholarship limitations right now and the sanctions against Ole Miss, any scholarship athlete lost is an important loss. So, but anyway, the bottom line is right now there are no new names coming up. Rumors, Logan, you have rumors with you always. I was getting my hair cut earlier this week in Tupelo, and my barber said, I hear A.J. Brown is going to Alabama. Well, I hadn't heard that anywhere else, and I still haven't heard that. And I'm wondering if Dennis, the Mississippi State fan, hadn't leaned over in the hair gel too much and got some of those fumes. But you just don't know, Logan. It's that kind of situation right now. It's going to be fluid until these schools begin their terms in January and whatnot. But at least right now, you will hear some rumors and whatnot, but things do appear to have stabilized a little bit on the transfer front for Ole Miss. So we'll see how that plays out. I'll tell you what, when you lose a player the caliber of Shea Patterson, we're talking about a guy who was the #1 rated quarterback in the nation in the 2016 signing class. It's never good to lose a player of that caliber. So that being said, Ole Miss is, I think, is in a good situation with quarterback right now. You didn't know that 6 months ago. You didn't know what you had in Jordan Ta'amu. I don't think that coaching staff knew what they had in Jordan Ta'amu. We've heard about how much poise he would show in practice and the plays he would make in practice. We saw some of that. I saw enough to think that when Ta'amu took over, it would not be a disaster, and it certainly was not. He was much better than that. But they're very confident and comfortable moving forward with Jordan Ta'amu. But here's the thing. He's only started 5 games. The idea that he now goes into spring and summer uncontested with no quarterback competition, that's huge, because Jordan Ta'amu still needs every practice rep that he can get with the starters to further develop and be the best quarterback he can be. The idea now that there will be no quarterback competition, that there will be no possibility of shared roles, not just in games, but in practice. I think that's huge for Jordan Ta'amu. That will be big for his development. He's going to greatly benefit from the success he had in his 5 starts as Ole Miss quarterback. That's going to be great for him when the season kicks off in 2018. But also just having been the guy, having been the #1 quarterback going through practice in spring and through August camp. And really, to me, the quarterback picture right now looks a lot like it did before the 2017 season started. Ole Miss knew who its starter was going to be. They knew they had a junior college transfer behind him, but, they didn't know what that meant, didn't know exactly, what the depth was behind Shea Patterson, and it's kind of like that again. I don't think they don't have as much experience behind Tamu as Tamu provided behind Shea Patterson, at least with the games he was able to play in junior college. But basically they have depth that is unknown. So you've got a starting quarterback, and then it gets scary. But it's going to be good for Jordan Tamu to be able to go through the spring and summer as the starting quarterback. So, that's kind of the transfer situation for Ole Miss right now. Their coaches are out recruiting as well, and quarterback is a position that they are really working hard with. So we'll see. Signing day is coming up quick here on December 20th, Logan. It's within a week, man. Signing day is here. This is new for us. Ole Miss will have a press conference that day. What's State doing? Will they have a press conference on signing day with this new early date?
That's the plan, and I guess that may be the next time I get to talk to Joe Moorhead and be in the same room with him. I'm not sure, but as far as what's going on at State right now with the current staff that's on hand, lots of bowl practice, and I've actually gotten to see some of that bowl practice, Parrish. It's first practices I've been able to attend since July, so pretty new experience out there. We're only able to see maybe the first 20 to 25 minutes of those practices, a lot of individual stuff, and basically when they get to start doing 7-on-7 type stuff, they kick us out and they kind of do their own thing. But this first week has kind of been about development. They've kind of called it development week, talking to interim coach Greg Knox, and that's kind of what they've done in years past is go in and try to get a lot of those younger guys and guys that have been on the scout team throughout much of the season, try to get them back more involved in the offense and defense, and kind of get them most of the reps. Let the starters kind of sit out and kind of mend some of those wounds that they've accumulated throughout the fall, and kind of get some of those guys back on track. Some of those guys that were kind of banged up towards the end of the year, they're not practicing right now, but talking to Greg Knox yesterday, they're going to try to play in this bowl game. Des Harris, Keith Mixon, Lashard Durr, Dontavian Lee, all those guys aren't practicing right now, but they're going to try to play in the Tax Slayer Bowl. They're going to actually start preparing for Louisville starting on Friday. They're taking Thursday off, today off, and they're going to try to start working towards Louisville. That development week ends with the day off on Thursday, and they're going to jump into kind of game prep on Friday. They'll practice for a few days. They'll break for about a week for Christmas, and then they'll report back to campus on Christmas Day and fly out Christmas afternoon to Jacksonville to get to the bowl site. They'll actually start practicing in Jacksonville on the 26th, leading up to the game on the 30th. But it's kind of a strange situation. Like I said, all those coaches left. They don't have an offensive coordinator. They don't have a defensive coordinator. They don't have a head coach. They don't have their starting quarterback. And, that's a lot to be without when you're facing a former Heisman Trophy winner and a Heisman Trophy finalist this year in Lamar Jackson. So it's going to be an uphill climb for Mississippi State in this bowl game. But, at the end of the day, a lot of these bowl games, when you're not in that 14 playoff, mostly it's about getting a big fat check and getting some work in for some of these younger players moving forward towards the future.
Logan, let's talk women's basketball a little bit. I know Mississippi State is rolling. We'll get to them. Ole Miss is rolling too by Ole Miss standards. They've won 7 straight now. They haven't quite Matt Insel talks about the schedule that they've played so far. They had a nice road win at Temple. They've played some top 120, top 140 teams like that. The schedule's fixing to shift a little bit when they go to Oregon on Sunday. And I know you'll talk about the Ducks here in just a second. State having a big win against Oregon last night. But, this Ole Miss team, Logan, we have seen the Rebels get off to fast starts before, but they haven't quite been able to carry that momentum into a successful conference season and get into the NCAA tournament. I like this team right now. They are overcoming some adversity with the loss of their second leading scorer in Chandrika Sessom, and with the loss of their best rebounder in Kate Rogers. They'll get Rogers back after Christmas. They won't get Sessom back. She's done, and that's a big loss for this team, but they are continuing to win anyway. What the loss of Sessom does, however, is really remove an athletic player, and this is not an athletic team at most positions. Now, Medina Muhammad at the two guard is a very solid player, a good shooter who can score off the bounce and create shots for herself. You know, it's great when Sessom was there with her because that took some attention away from Muhammad, who is the second leading scorer in the SEC right now. But they're kind of remaking themselves and continuing to win against the schedule that they have right now. We'll see how this team competes when they get to Oregon. Insel believes they're ready. He believes the schedule has prepared them, that they've been working through some things. You know, right now you just see this team that plays hard defensively, gets hands in the passing lane, and does these things, and that's good. But, you know, sometimes that limited athleticism shows up. There were a couple of times in the game I covered against Southern Miss on Tuesday where an Ole Miss player would get the ball in the open floor and couldn't finish the layup, couldn't dribble it down and make a move on a somewhat contested or maybe uncontested play and finish the layup. That's the kind of thing that will haunt you in conference play if you're not able to convert on open floor opportunities like that. They've gotten a big lift from Promise Taylor, the 6'5" freshman. She's still learning her way around, works through some foul trouble every now and then. She didn't have that against Southern Miss. She's a big girl, a big presence down low. Again, not quite as quick as some players that she will face. She's very athletic and can finish around the basket when she gets position, when she gets her shoulder square. A very nice addition to this team, but they're going to have to rebound better and continue to defend. Logan, I've looked at this team start fast before, and I've thought, well, we'll see what happens when conference play gets here. When they dropped that game to St. Louis in November, I thought, well, not much is going to happen with this group. They've proved me wrong so far. I'm interested to see what they accomplish at Oregon Sunday and what they can get done when SEC play starts not long after that. Talk to me about this Oregon women's basketball team a little bit. What did you see from them against Mississippi State?
They've got some length and they've got some pretty good pieces, and a lot of those pieces are young. I think this Oregon team is still going to continue to grow, and you saw that even last year. Mississippi State played Oregon kind of around Thanksgiving out in Honolulu, and Mississippi State didn't have a whole lot of trouble with them, in that win. And then you look up, and at the end of the season, Oregon goes to the Elite Eight. They got bounced by UConn, and a lot of teams got bounced by UConn every year come tournament time. And but they had a good run. They played well in postseason and gained some confidence off of that. And they were good. They came into Starkville last night 8-1. Their only loss, I think, was to maybe Louisville in that game. So they've played some good teams and got some good wins, and they've got some good pieces. They entered last night third in the country in scoring offense and fifth in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. So they're a team that puts up a lot of points, and they scored 79 points against Mississippi State last night, and that's something Vic Schaefer wasn't very happy about. He loves to keep those low scoring games. He's a defensive minded coach, and 79 points is not something that's going to be happy, but his team turned around and scored 90 points, and a lot of those came from two players, Tiara McCowan and Victoria Vivians, each going over 30 points. Tiara McCowan was just unbelievable all night long. She finished with 35 points, 19 rebounds, and 5 blocks, Parrish, and 12 of those 19 rebounds were on the offensive end. And it's not like you've seen that her have some big games like that in the past against some inferior competition. That wasn't the case last night. She brought her her A game to a big time game where they actually needed it. It was a top 10 matchup. Mississippi State ranked number 5, Oregon ranked number 9 in the country. And Tierra McCowan was very efficient. She was 15 of 18 from the floor, 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Just gave them some really, really good minutes. She picked up an early foul in that game. And then like just a couple of minutes, I think it maybe 2.5 minutes into the game, she picked up her first foul. And then she played the rest of the first half without getting another foul. Now, she picked up a couple of fouls in the second half, but really never got into foul trouble. And that's something that's kind of been a concern, especially this year when they don't have Chinwe Okorie. They don't have another big to really come in and kind of spell her. You know, they're relying on her to eat up most of those minutes. She's in tremendous shape. She's in a lot better shape than she was a year ago. So she can play. I mean, she played 35 minutes last night and probably could have played more. She was in, you know, swatting shots, and she was very active on the offensive and defensive end last night. And then talking about Victoria Vivian's game, she only had 4 points at halftime. So she really just went off in that second half. And she's playing a lot of minutes at the 4, and she was in a tough matchup defensively last night against a girl that was a lot taller than she was. So she had a tough draw defensively, but kind of came into her own offensively in the second half. And, you know, Victoria Vivians is known for putting up a lot of points, but she was kind of one of those volume scorers of the last 3 years. But this year she's taken much better shots. Her shot selection is so much better. Last night she was 10 of 15 from the floor, 5 of 8 from 3, and just, you know, she scored 26 points in the second half. So she really was kind of made the difference. And early on in that ball game, Morgan Williams was a great answer offensively. She's kind of not looking to score this year, but she will score if you leave her open. She's going to jump in and go into that to the free throw line, pull up and hit that little free throw jumper. And State's just kind of clicking on all cylinders right now. The difference between this year's Mississippi State team and last year's is they don't have the depth. They don't have the numbers to throw out there at you. Their first 6 players are really good. 6 or 7 players. They're about that deep. But then they kind of fall off tremendously from there. A lot of young players still trying to find their way from that point on. So they don't have the numbers that they can throw at you. The good thing is they're in tremendous shape, so they can play those starters, 35 to 40 minutes a game and really never get tired and really never see a drop off at that point. But they need some of those younger players to continue to develop, because March is still a long time from now, and those legs start getting tired. When you see those starters playing those type of minutes, so they need to really develop that depth. And I think getting Jordan Danbury is going to help them. She came in. She's an Arkansas transfer, had to sit out. She came in mid-year last year, so she came in at kind of middle of December last year. She's just now eligible to play. Her first game was this past Sunday against Little Rock, and then she got a few minutes last night. So she's going to help them a lot, just to give them another body, another player that's been through the SEC wars.
On the men's side, the Rebels broke a 3-game losing streak with an 82-69 win over Sam Houston State Wednesday night. Logan, we saw some things that that I thought signaled a little bit of improvement and maybe some encouragement for Ole Miss, at least regarding post play on offense, but still some things that kind of showed up, that have been showing up, that have been problems this year. Mostly focus. This is a team that plays really well for stretches, for periods of time. But, it's a team that tends to lose its edge as the game goes on, doesn't seem to be able to sustain the intensity that it needs for long periods of time. Now, Bruce Stevens played really well last night. He's emerged as the starting center. Dominic Olenichek, the 7-footer, the transfer from Drake that we thought would be the starting center. He hit all 3 field goal attempts. He's gotten better. He altered some shots. He blocked a couple of shots. He did some nice things. At the end of the day, he's always going to have a problem with quickness in the post. The speed of the game is something he's having a difficult time catching up with right now. And he's just not going to see very many slow opponents. But there was improvement in post offense for Ole Miss. It was big to see the Rebels have the confidence to throw it down to the post to get a basket, because so many times early this season we've watched these guys on the offensive end not even throw it in there and just pass along the perimeter, pass on the perimeter. And, maybe drive it into the lane and drive it back out or that kind of thing. And, it just looks like a very stagnant offense when you see that. So it was different from that perspective last night. Post defense still has a ways to go, a long way to go. As I mentioned, the quickness that, Olejniczak struggles with when the opponent has that. With Stevens, it's more just positioning, and he just wasn't called on to be a great defensive player in junior college, and that's kind of showing up right now. So anyway, the bottom line is the Rebels snapped a losing streak. They are 5-4 right now. They are back in action Saturday at 2:30 against Illinois State, also at the Pavilion. One other thing I noticed last night that I thought was a bit of a concern. Terrence Davis is the most athletic player on this team. He will be one of the team's leaders. He went into the game last night averaging 16.9 points. But in the first half, Markel Crawford, the grad transfer from Memphis, was lighting it up. It was his best shooting night as an Ole Miss player. He hit 4 of his first 5 shots from three-point range. He finished 4 for 8, but at a time he was 4 for 5 behind the arc, and that's when Ole Miss built a big lead. Well, when they were getting some buckets in the post and when Crawford was knocking down shots, Terrence Davis wasn't taking any shots. Breein Tyree wasn't getting many either, but he handled it better. It was Davis who started pushing, and that really kind of disrupted the flow for Ole Miss, and that's something that they're going to have to deal with moving forward. When they are spreading the ball around and getting shots and points from other places, Davis still has to be into the game because they need him to rebound. They need him to hit some follow-up shots. I mean, that kind of thing. I mean, that's the skill level that he has. He needs to use that as a rebounder as well when he's not taking the shots. So Ole Miss 8-4, back in action Saturday at 2:30. I know the Bulldogs went on the road to schedule. Their schedule had been criticized, but Cincinnati's a good team and they played well. Talk about that game a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. State's entered that game 8-0 and suffered their first loss Tuesday night against Cincinnati, a top 25 team. Game ended up being 65-50. So Mississippi State, played fairly well on the defensive end to hold Cincinnati to just 65 points, but struggled on the offensive end. Really, the only kind of go-to player, one of the only bright spots for Mississippi State in that ball game was Eric Coleman. He had 18 points, 10 rebounds in 26 minutes. So he was very effective in the time that he was on the floor. The Weatherspoon brothers had a dozen points apiece, and that was a good scoring option too. But right now, State's still trying to find their way. They've gone through some injuries. In fact, Tuesday night was the first time they've had all 11 scholarship players available throughout the whole season. So there's either been somebody hurt or somebody suspended. It's the first time they've actually had their full allotment of players, and you can kind of tell it. Looking at Abdul Adu, he had 1 shot attempt. And he's Mississippi State's starting 5. So they've got to figure out a way to work the ball inside to him. He's very athletic, and he played well on the defensive end during that ball game. He had 3 blocks in that game, 4 steals. So he was very active on the defensive end, and he's capable offensively. He's a guy that can score some points and kind of bang around in there in the post. And he just hasn't. They just haven't gone inside very much to him. They kind of settle for hanging around on the perimeter, shooting 3-point shots. That's something Lamar Peters did a lot the other night. Lamar Peters coming off that strong showing at the Adidas Nations thing this summer. A lot of those NBA draft projections had him going this year. He was kind of one of those hot names, kind of one of those sleeper prospects that kind of came on everybody's board. But looking at his numbers Tuesday night, he was 0 for 11 from the field, 0 for 7 from 3-point range, and had 6 turnovers and 4 fouls. So you didn't get a whole lot out of him. That's something that they've got to remedy. He just had a bad game and just kept shooting. It wasn't like he was having a bad game and just started trying to find his teammates for some plays. He just kept putting the ball up, and it kept not going in. So they've got to figure out some things. It looked like a young team that went on the road for the first time against a quality opponent and didn't play very well. And that's kind of what they've got to get back to. They finish out the rest of this month at home before they finish before a conference play starts. So this is still a very young basketball team. Don't have a senior on the team. Well, they've got one senior. He's a walk-on. So this is still a young basketball team, mostly freshmen and sophomores. There's a couple of juniors in Eric Holman and Quindary Weatherspoon on the team. Xavier Stapleton's a junior as well, but he's a transfer from La Tech who sat out for a year and a half with 3 knee injuries. So, it's still a very young team. They're still trying to find their way, but they're a lot better basketball team than they were a year ago. You can see them growing up and taking strides. And I'm interested to see how this team, I think they're going to progressively get better as they mature and as this season goes along. They're back at home Saturday against UT Martin.
Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. Be sure to check out The Memo, our news podcast, all things Northeast Mississippi. That comes to you every Wednesday and Friday. And for all your high school sports needs, check out Prep Rally. That comes to you every Wednesday. Logan and I will be back with you next week for another round of Double Coverage.